Hi folks, over the next 3 days we're going to think about the question, why trust the Bible? Can we trust the Bible? There's been an erosion of trust in our society, in our culture. Many people struggle to trust particularly authority figures or authoritative texts. There's an issue there in our culture to do with trust. But can we trust the Bible, and if so, why? Well, 3 things over the next 3 days. The first one is this: we can trust the process. What I mean by that is that we can trust the historical process by which we've now got our Bible. I'm not going to talk about the Old Testament. If you want to talk with me about that, very happy to talk about that. Not got time. A short video. But in terms of the 4 eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, the 4 Gospels, what we see is that, well, 2 things. The first is that we have records of real events. When Luke begins his Gospel, he talks about how this is an account. He's talking about real events and real people and real places. He goes on to describe people that we can confirm from other historical sources, places that we know about from other historical sources. These are records of real events. There's so much that we can know from other sources. Here's just some of the things that we can confirm from non-biblical sources. So from Jewish and Roman historians, we know the name Jesus, we know the place and the time of his public ministry. We know the name of his mother Mary, we know the name of his brother James, we know about his fame as a teacher and a miracle worker. These are all things that we know outside of the Bible, aside from the Bible. We know the fact that people labelled Jesus the Messiah, the Christ. We know the time and the manner of his execution, that he was crucified, and it was around the time of the Jewish Passover festival. We know about the involvement of the Roman and Jewish leadership in his death. We know about the eclipse that happened at the time of his crucifixion, the report of Jesus' appearances to his followers after his death, and we know about the flourishing and the growth of this movement of people that worshipped Jesus. We know all of that outside of the Bible's accounts. We've got records of real events. There's a wonderful thing in Acts chapter 26. Paul has been brought before King Agrippa. Festus butts into the conversation and basically says, Paul, you're mad, you're delusional. And this is what Paul says to him: most excellent Festus, what I am saying is true and reasonable. And then he says this: the king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I am convinced that none of this has escaped his notice, because it was not done in a corner. You see what he's saying to Festus? That the things I'm talking about, they didn't happen in a corner somewhere. No, these are public things, public truths that people know about. We've got records of real events. But not just that. We've got reliable records of real events. That's really important, isn't it? Because often people will say, oh, well, some stuff happened, but then it got garbled over time. The transmission, it was kind of lost in transmission. Chinese whispers, that kind of idea. But actually, what we see with the manuscripts of the accounts, the 4 gospel accounts of Jesus' life, is that we have what historians look for is the quality of the manuscripts, the quantity of the manuscripts, and the time between the events themselves and when the things were written. And what we find with the New Testament is that the manuscripts are of an excellent quality. There's a massive quantity of manuscripts, fragments, smaller bits, bigger bits, that we can piece together to understand exactly what was written. And the time span between the events and when things were written is minuscule compared to a lot of other historical records and the events that they're about. So we've got these records of real events, and they're reliable records of real events. We can trust the process.